Hundreds of wildfires burning across northern Ontario this summer meant thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. Nick Dunne covers the Northeastern Ontario Hubs. He's been looking into what it revealed about this province's emergency management capacity and joins us now from Sudbury for more. Hey, Nick.
Hi, Jan.
So we've heard about forest fires across Canada and the US. A lot of people will think about British Columbia, but of course there have been fires affecting towns and cities here in Ontario as well. And you were following one in Deer Lake, First Nations. What has it been like for them there?
It was quite a stressful situation. They hadn't received hardly any rain in months. It was getting drier. The lake water levels were dropping. And around early July is when they started to see ashes flying into the community, meaning that wind was blowing the fire closer. By July 1st, Red Lake 51 fire was about 6 square kilometers. By July 11th, when the community began their evacuation process, it was looking closer to 260 square kilometers in size and heading very close to the community. In fact, nearly 20 kilometers away. So it was an incredibly risky situation. And they are one of 6 First Nations in Northwestern Ontario this year that have to be evacuated.
I want to pull up an aerial photo. You can see on the top part of that photo just black. Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so this is an aerial shot that Councillor David Meekus took of Deer Lake First Nation, just kind of showing some of the devastation along the way. You can only imagine flying over and seeing this as you're heading back or heading out from your community. We often think about these large stretches of Northwestern Ontario as being just wildlife and nature and forest, but there are many, many communities, well over 40 communities in this area that's about the size of France. So it's quite a scary proposition to see when you're coming in or out of your community.
Now, you spoke to Environment Canada climatologist David Phillips, not only about the number of fires, but how they're different than ever before. What did he share with you?
Mm-hmm. Well, David Phillips really wasn't mincing words when he spoke with me, Jayan. He says that the fire season starts earlier, it ends later, these fires are bigger, it's drier out, and it's impacting more people. He sent me some data going back from the 1980s to show that the 10-year average has more than doubled in terms of the total area of fires being burned. So from 1983 to 1993 to 2011 to 2021, we've seen more than a doubling of the total area that gets burned on average. So it's accelerating at a pretty rapid pace. And he's saying that in the next century, we can see these numbers double to go up tenfold, depending on various models. So this is becoming an increasing reality that as we see more area burned, we're putting more communities at risk, First Nations and otherwise, for these kinds of disasters. So they're going to become, over time more common.
Let's talk about those communities. It's not, I imagine it's not as simple as just boarding people on a plane and then sending them to, a camp or a city, but what kind of work goes into hosting communities that have to evacuate?
Right. So all levels of government are involved in this, and that includes tribal organizations and the First Nations themselves, right? Municipalities, the province, and Indigenous Services Canada are all involved in this process of the evacuations. Of course, it is more than just food. So the province will be the ones typically coordinating the province-wide effort, who goes where, asking various municipalities to host. But the host communities themselves are looking more than just a roof over people's heads and some food through 3 meals a day, right? It's mental health care, physical health care, recreational activities. These people can be here for well over a month, right? And when you're experiencing that kind of stress, when you've been displaced, like these communities have, there's a ton that has to be done and a ton that has to be taken care of. Even reunifying families, because communities get sent out in stages, right? So you might have, a mother. Well, this happened in Deer Lake, who was in Cornwall or in Thunder Bay while her children were in Cornwall, which is well over 1,600 kilometers away. So you can't even imagine the stress that a lot of these people go through on a yearly basis, especially if they're doing this, multiple times over the next decade, right?
I am curious about that. Something that stuck out to me in your article for tvo.org is that the two cities that were chosen for this particular evacuation was in Thunder Bay and Cornwall, like you mentioned, very far from each other. How did they decide where they will go? Is this just sort of like who's available?
Yeah, it's often a question of availability. My understanding is that the city of Thunder Bay was already hosting a number of communities, and they were able to take a certain number of people in from Deer Lake, but they were just over capacity, right? Thunder Bay is just generally the natural choice, given that it's the largest city in northwestern Ontario and has kind of the most available services. So the NAV Center in Cornwall, which again is at the far stretch of eastern Ontario, had about a day to prepare about 500 people. They were partly closed. They had to recall staff and accommodate these people in a very short period of time. I believe also the city of Cochrane, or the town of Cochrane rather, had a number of people as well. So people are kind of spread across the province in various stages, just based on the ability of various municipalities to hold a certain number of people.
Now, as we all know, Canadians re-elected another Liberal minority government. I'm curious, has this government in the past or now made any sort of pledge to help dealing with not only the fires, but also the evacuations?
Well, part of the Liberal government's platform this year included $500 million towards increased equipment and staffing and training for community-led firefighters. So you're looking at community-based fire groups, and even First Nations fire groups are included in that. There was also talk of implementing a national climate change adaptation strategy, which is a pretty significant thing. But climate change adaptation is a very broad kind of area of study, right? This includes everything from building raised beds on your homes to prevent flooding risks. But, everyone from Phillips to Dr. David Pearson at Laurentian University, who's working with a number of tribal organizations on climate change adaptation, he says that, evacuations are an inevitable adaptation, right? That we have to move people out as a result of climate change aggravating natural occurrences like these fires. So it's yet to be seen whether or not, evacuations and how strongly evacuations play in that larger strategy, but it's certainly something that climatologists, climate change experts, emergency management organizations, and First Nations themselves are all very concerned about as we see a growing trend of these fires and ultimately evacuations.
Something we will continue to follow. Nick, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jan.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.